Diana Chen's hands shook as she counted the bills one more time under the flickering fluorescent light of the 24-hour laundromat. 3 20s for 10s, 7 ones. $87. That was everything. Everything left after the divorce attorney took his final payment, after the landlord posted the eviction notice, after her ex-husband's promises of child support dissolved into blocked phone numbers and a forwarding address in another state. Her daughter, Lily, slept curled on 2 plastic chairs pushed together, using Diana's jacket as a blanket. 6 years old and already learning to sleep anywhere, through anything. Diana had told her they were on an adventure, that sleeping in a laundromat while their clothes washed was camping indoors. Lily had smiled, trusting, because 6-year-olds still believe their mothers could fix anything. Diana pressed her palms against her eyes, fighting tears that would solve nothing. She was 32 years old, had a bachelor's degree in geology that she'd never used after marrying straight out of college, and possessed exactly $87 between her family and homelessness. The math was simple. The motel down the street wanted $45 per night. That bought them 2 nights, maybe 3 if she could negotiate. Then what? Her phone buzzed, battery at 8%, and she almost didn't check it. But the number wasn't one she recognized, local area code, professional format. She answered before she could talk herself out of it. Ms. Chen, this is Howard Brenner from Brenner and Associates in Hollow Creek, New Mexico. I'm sorry to call so late, but I've been trying to reach you regarding your uncle's estate. Diana's exhaustion made the words feel distant, like they were being spoken underwater. My uncle, Marcus Chen, he passed away 3 weeks ago. I'm his estate attorney. According to his will, you're his sole beneficiary. Uncle Marcus. Diana hadn't seen him since she was maybe 8 years old. A strange, quiet man who'd shown up to one family reunion and spent the entire time talking to himself, sketching diagrams on napkins. Her mother had called him unstable, said he'd wasted his life chasing fantasies in the desert. After that reunion, he'd stopped coming to family events. Diana had forgotten he existed. I don't understand. We weren't close. I barely remember him. Nevertheless, his will is quite clear. He's left you property in Hollow Creek. Approximately 3 acres, including a small trailer home and what he called the cave. The county assessment values it at $850. $850. Diana's laugh came out broken. That's not even enough to cover moving costs. Brenner cleared his throat. I should mention there have been several inquiries about the property. A gentleman named Victor Castellanos has been quite persistent. He's offered to purchase it for $5,000 cash if you're interested in a quick sale. Given your circumstances. How do you know my circumstances? I don't mean to pry, Ms. Chen, but Mr. Castellanos mentioned he'd done some research. He seems very motivated to acquire the property. Diana's geology degree might have been in use for a decade, but she still remembered the fundamental rule. When someone offers you significantly more than something is worth, they know something you don't. I like to see it first. Of course. Though I should warn you, the property is quite remote. No utilities, limited road access. Mr. Chen lived very simply out there, and the trailer hasn't been maintained since his death. If you're considering keeping it, you should know it's not really habitable. Diana looked at Lily, at her daughter's face peaceful in sleep, at the 2 garbage bags beside the chairs that contained everything they still owned. Habitable was relative when you were sleeping in a laundromat. When can I take possession? Immediately. I can overnight you the keys and deed. But Ms. Chen, $5,000 could set you up somewhere more practical. Perhaps you should consider. Send me the keys. I'll decide after I see it. She ended the call and stared at her phone until the screen went dark. $850 of property she'd inherited from an uncle she didn't remember, in a town she'd never heard of. And someone wanted to pay $5,000 for its sight unseen, which meant it was worth more than that. Maybe much more. Or maybe it was worth nothing and Victor Castellanos was a scam artist. But when you had $87 in 2 nights before complete homelessness, even a questionable inheritance in the New Mexico desert started looking like salvation. The keys arrived 2 days later at the post office general delivery, where Diana had been checking since Brenner's call. A single brass key on a ring with a faded tag that read Cave, Main Entry, and another smaller key labeled Trailer. The deed was folded into an envelope with a handwritten note from Uncle Marcus dated 6 months before his death. Diana, if you're reading this, I'm gone and you found what I left. Don't sell to Castellanos. He knows what's inside. The crystals sing. Listen carefully and you'll understand why I stayed. Trust the resonance. M. Lily read over her shoulder, sounding out words. We're crystals, Mama. Rocks that grow in special shapes. Like jewels, kind of. Are we going to be rich? Diana folded the note carefully, tucking it into her pocket next to the $87 that was now down to $62 after 2 more nights at the motel. I don't know, baby, but we're going to go find out. The bus to Hollow Creek cost $48 for both of them, leaving Diana with $14 in change. They rode through the night, Lily sleeping against her shoulder while Diana watched the landscape transform from city to desert. Scrubland and mesas and sky, so big it made her feel microscopic. The bus driver announced Hollow Creek at 6 a.m., and Diana gathered their bags, waking Lily gently. The town was a gas station, a diner, and maybe 15 houses scattered along a road that looked like it had been paved sometime in the 1970s and never repaired since. Diana stood on the cracked pavement with their garbage bags and watched the bus pull away, its taillights disappearing into the dawn. Adventure, Lily said, trying out the word Diana had been using. But her voice carried a tremor that said she was starting to understand adventure was another word for uncertainty. The diner smelled like coffee and bacon grease, and the woman behind the counter looked up from wiping tables with an expression somewhere between curiosity and concern. Diana ordered 2 eggs, toast, and milk for Lily, $3.50, and asked about getting to Marcus Chen's property. The woman's face changed immediately. You're related to Marcus? He was my uncle. Left me his place. The cave property. The woman set down her rag, studying Diana with new intensity. You planning to keep it or sell? I haven't decided yet. Victor Castellanos been calling you? Diana's instinct prickled. You know him. Everyone here knows him. Owns half the mining rights in the county, always looking to expand. Been trying to buy Marcus's land for 15 years, ever since Marcus found something out there. Marcus never said what exactly, but he stopped coming to town after that. Got real private, real protective of that cave. What did he find? The woman shrugged. Marcus said the rocks sang to him. Most people figured he'd lost his mind, living alone in the desert, talking to stones. But then Victor started offering serious money, and folks wondered if maybe Marcus wasn't so crazy after all. Lily finished her eggs while Diana processed this information. Rocks that sang. Crystals with resonance properties. Her geology education stirred, remembering lectures about quartz formations and piezoelectric properties, about certain crystal structures that could vibrate at specific frequencies when subjected to pressure or electrical current. How do I get out there? Roads mostly washed out. You'd need a 4-wheel drive, and even then it's rough. But Tom Wexler at the gas station does run sometimes. He might take you for $20. Diana had $14 left. She thanked the woman, paid the bill, and walked with Lily to the gas station where a man in his 60s was checking inventory. Tom Wexler listened to her explanation, looked at Lily, and named his price. $30 to get you out there. Another $30 to pick you up if you decide you can't stay. I don't do credit, and I don't do charity. I have $14. Then you're 12 short of a ride and 46 short of rescue. Diana stood there feeling the weight of every bad decision that had led to this moment. The rushed marriage to James because she'd been pregnant and her parents had insisted. The abandoned career because James had wanted her home with a baby. The trust that had shattered when she discovered his gambling, his debts, his willingness to disappear rather than face responsibility. All of it accumulating into this, standing in a desert gas station, unable to afford a ride to property she'd inherited from a man who might have been insane. I'll work for the difference. I can pump gas, work the register clean. Not hiring. Lily tugged on Diana's sleeve. Mama, I have money. She pulled out a crumpled $5 bill from her pocket. From the Tooth Fairy. You can use it. Diana's throat closed. She knelt down, hugging her daughter so Lily wouldn't see the tears. Baby, that's your money. But we need to get to our new house. The tooth fairy would want me to help. Tom Wexler's expression softened slightly. Tell you what, 14 plus the kids 5 gets you out there. You can pay me the rest when you get settled. But I'm not coming back to get you unless you call and have the money. Deal. Diana nodded, not trusting her voice. They climbed into Tom's battered pickup truck, their garbage bags loaded in the back, and headed out into the desert on a road that degraded from pavement to gravel to something that was barely a track at all. The drive took 45 minutes of bone-rattling terrain. Tom didn't talk much, just pointed out landmarks. That's where the old copper mine collapsed in '82 and navigated around boulders that had rolled onto the trail. Finally, he stopped where the track ended at a barbed wire fence with a hand-painted sign. Private property. Chen. No trespassing. This is it. Trailer's about a quarter-mile in. Cave entrance is behind it, built into the mesa. You sure about this? Diana looked at the landscape. Red dirt and scrub brush and rock formations that looked like ancient giants frozen mid-stride. In the distance, she could see a small structure that might be the trailer, and beyond it, the mesa rising like a wall. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. It was also completely isolated. I'm sure. Tom nodded. Radio doesn't work out here. Cell phone's useless. If you need help, you walk back to the road and wave down whoever passes, which might be nobody for days. Marcus made it work for 15 years, but Marcus was different. You have a kid. We'll manage. He drove away, truck disappearing in a cloud of dust, and Diana stood there with Lily beside her and $19 to her name. The silence was absolute. No traffic, no neighbors, no ambient city noise she'd lived with her entire life. Just wind and the sound of her own breathing. It's quiet, Lily whispered, like speaking too loud might disturb something. Yeah, baby, real quiet. They walked toward the trailer, garbage bags dragging in the dirt. Up close, the structure looked worse than Diana had feared. Single-wide mobile home, vintage 1970s maybe, with rust eating through the corners and windows covered in decades of dust. But the door wasn't locked. Marcus apparently hadn't worried about theft this far from civilization. And inside, the space was surprisingly organized. One main room with a kitchenette, a sleeping area separated by a curtain, and a bathroom that made Diana's heart sink. No running water, just a chemical toilet and a bucket. The kitchenette had a camp stove and shelves stocked with canned goods that were probably older than Lily. A folding table held notebooks, all filled with Marcus's handwriting and diagrams Diana couldn't immediately interpret. But the real surprise was what hung on every wall. Crystals. Dozens of them, ranging from thumb size to pieces as large as dinner plates, suspended on wire or mounted on shelves. They caught the light streaming through dirty windows and fractured it into rainbow patterns that danced across the walls. Lily gasped with delight, reaching for the nearest crystal, and Diana stopped her hand gently. Don't touch yet. We don't know if they're safe. They're so pretty. They were. Even covered in dust, even displayed in a trailer that should have been condemned, they were beautiful. Diana moved closer, examining them with her geology training finally waking up after a decade of dormancy. These weren't ordinary quartz. The formations were wrong, too regular, too precise, like they'd grown according to rules that normal crystals didn't follow. She found Marcus's journal on the table, opening to a random page dated 3 years ago. Day 3847 in the cave. The harmonics continued to intensify. Today, I recorded frequencies at 432 Hz, 528 Hz, and 741 Hz simultaneously. The triple resonance has never occurred before. The crystals are responding to something, possibly seismic activity deep in the mantle, possibly something else entirely. Victor called again, offered $50,000. I hung up. He'll never understand that the value isn't monetary. The crystals sing truths that money can't measure. Diana flipped backward, finding earlier entries. Day 1. Found the cave entrance while surveying for copper deposits. Initial assessment suggested standard quartz formation, possibly fluorite. But when I entered the main chamber, I heard it. A humming, not quite audible but felt in my bones. Like the mountain itself was breathing. I've never experienced anything like it. Day 127. The crystals aren't just formations, they're a system. A natural resonance chamber that amplifies and harmonizes sound waves at specific frequencies. I've documented 17 distinct tones that repeat in patterns. It's like the earth itself is playing music. Day 412. Victor Castellanos tracked me down, offered $10,000 for the property. When I asked how he knew about the cave, he said he had sources. I refused. He warned me that refusing his offers was unwise. I told him to leave. Diana set down the journal, her mind racing. A resonance chamber, crystals that produced specific frequencies, and a businessman who'd been trying to buy the property for 15 years, escalating from $10,000 to $50,000 to the $5,000 he'd offered her before she'd even seen the place. Mama, can we see the cave? Diana checked the time. Late morning, plenty of daylight left. Yeah, baby. Let's go see what Uncle Marcus was protecting. The cave entrance was exactly where Tom had indicated, built into the base of the mesa about 100 yards behind the trailer. But Diana had expected a natural opening, maybe with some boards Marcus had used to block wildlife. What she found instead was a steel door set into reinforced concrete, industrial grade, completely incongruous with the desert landscape. The door had no handle, just a keyhole that matched Marcus's cave. Main entry key. Diana inserted it, turned, and felt mechanisms engage with a heavy click. The door swung inward on hinges that barely squeaked, revealing a darkness that her phone's flashlight couldn't immediately penetrate. Stay close to me, she told Lily, taking her daughter's hand. Don't touch anything until I say it's safe. They stepped inside, and Diana's first thought was that the air tasted different. Cooler, drier, with a mineral tang that reminded her of laboratories and underground rivers. Her flashlight beam swept across walls that sparkled like they'd been embedded with diamonds. But these weren't diamonds. They were crystals, thousands of them, covering every surface in formations that range from tiny needles to massive columns thicker than her torso. The entrance tunnel extended about 20 feet before opening into what Marcus had called the main chamber. Diana's breath caught when she saw it. The space was enormous, cathedral-sized, with a domed ceiling that disappeared into darkness her flashlight couldn't reach. And everywhere, floor, walls, ceiling, crystals. Millions of them, growing in impossible patterns that suggested intelligence rather than random geological processes. Lily's voice was barely a whisper. Mama, it's singing. Diana went still, listening. At first, she heard nothing beyond the sound of their breathing and the faint echo of her flashlight humming. But then beneath that, almost too low to register consciously, she felt a vibration. Not quite sound, but something her body recognized before her ears did. A humming that seemed to come from the crystals themselves, from the rock, from the very air in the chamber. She moved deeper, Lily's hand tight in hers, and the humming grew more distinct. Not louder, but more complex. Multiple tones layering over each other in harmonies that should have clashed, but somehow resolved into something that felt right. Mathematical. Purposeful. Her phone buzzed. Impossible. There was no signal out here, and she checked it instinctively. The screen showed something she'd never seen before. The audio recording app had opened itself and was displaying a waveform of complex, repeating patterns. The frequencies scrolling across the screen read 432 Hz, 528 Hz, and 741 Hz, exactly what Marcus had documented in his journal. The crystals were producing sound. Somehow, through processes Diana didn't understand, they were vibrating at specific frequencies, and the chamber was amplifying those vibrations into a harmonic system that her phone could detect, even though her ears could barely process it. What is this place? Lily's question was what Diana was thinking but couldn't articulate. I don't know yet, baby, but I think your great-great-uncle found something very special. They explored for another hour, Diana taking photos and videos, documenting crystal formations and trying to map the chamber's dimensions. It was vast, easily 200 feet across, maybe more. The floor was smooth, like water had once flowed through here and worn the stone into curves. And at the chamber's center, raised on a natural stone platform, was the largest crystal Diana had ever seen outside of a museum. It was taller than her, maybe 8 feet, and shaped like a perfect hexagonal column that tapered to a point. But unlike the other crystals, this one seemed to glow faintly from within, like it contained its own light source. Diana approached carefully, aware that she was operating on instinct rather than knowledge, that everything about this cave defied her training. She reached out, fingers stopping just short of touching the crystal surface. The humming intensified, multiple frequencies suddenly resolving into a single pure tone that Diana could actually hear. It wasn't painful or overwhelming. It was beautiful, like listening to a tuning fork that had been perfectly calibrated to something fundamental in the universe. Lily pressed her hands over her ears, not in pain, but in wonder. It's playing just for us. Diana pulled her daughter close, and they stood there in the darkness, illuminated only by her phone's dying flashlight, listening to a mountain sing through crystals that had probably been forming for millions of years. And she understood, suddenly, why Marcus had refused all of Victor's offers. This wasn't about money. This was about something irreplaceable. But she also understood why Victor wanted it. Crystals with these properties, natural resonators, perfect harmonic chambers, would be worth millions to the right buyers. Research laboratories, tech companies working on acoustic engineering, even spiritual organizations that believed in healing frequencies. And that was before considering the potential scientific value of understanding how this system had formed naturally. They walked back to the trailer as sunset painted the desert orange and purple, and Diana felt the weight of inheritance settling on her shoulders. Marcus had protected this place for 15 years, living in isolation, refusing money and comfort to keep the cave secret. Now that burden was hers, and she had no idea what to do with it. That night, lying on Marcus's narrow bed with Lily curled against her, Diana counted their remaining resources. $19, 2 garbage bags of possessions, a trailer with no utilities, and a cave full of singing crystals that someone desperately wanted to own. Tomorrow she'd figure out next steps. Tonight, she just let herself exist in the quiet of the desert, listening to the faint hum that even the trailer couldn't completely block out, and wondered if this was what hope felt like. Uncertain and terrifying, but somehow more solid than anything she'd felt in years. Morning came with light, so bright it hurt. Diana woke to find Lily already up, sitting on the trailer steps, drawing in the dirt with a stick. The view from here was staggering. Miles of desert stretching to mountains that looked like they'd been cut from purple paper and pasted against the horizon. No other buildings visible anywhere. Just land and sky and the overwhelming sense of being very, very small. Diana checked their food situation. Marcus's canned goods were mostly expired, but salvageable. Beans, soup, vegetables that would keep them alive, if not happy. The camp stove worked on propane, and there was half a tank left. Water was the real problem. Marcus had been using jerry cans filled from town, and the 3 she found were all empty. We need to go back to Hollow Creek, Diana told Lily. Get supplies. But we don't have money for Tom to drive us. Then we walk. It's only about 5 miles to the main road, maybe another mile to town. We can do that. They made it to Hollow Creek by late morning, both of them sunburned and exhausted. The diner woman, her name tag read Rita, looked up from the breakfast counter and nodded like she'd been expecting them. Survived the night? Barely. Diana sank onto a stool, every muscle aching. I need to buy water and basic supplies, but I'm short on cash. Is there work I can do? Anything. Rita considered this, wiping her hands on her apron. Kitchen help. $5 an hour, cash daily. You can start now if you want. It wasn't much, but it was something. Diana worked through lunch and dinner shifts, washing dishes and prepping food, while Lily sat in a back booth doing homework from a workbook Rita produced from somewhere. By closing time, Diana had earned $40 plus tips that brought her total to $53. Rita handed her a bag of groceries without being asked. Mark down stuff that won't sell. And there's a 55-gallon drum behind the gas station Tom said you can have. Rainwater collection. Won't be much this time of year, but it's something. Diana's throat tightened. Why are you helping me? Because Marcus was good people, and because Victor Castellanos is an asshole. Whatever you're planning to do with that property, don't sell it to him. What if I need to sell it? What if I can't make this work? Rita leaned against the counter, expression serious. Then sell it to someone else. Research institutions, universities, hell, even the government. But not Victor. He doesn't want those crystals for science. He wants to mine them, strip that cave bare, and sell the pieces to whoever pays most. Marcus died protecting that place. Don't let his sacrifice mean nothing. Diana carried the water drum back with Tom's help. He charged her $10, which left her with $43, and spent the evening reading more of Marcus's journals by lantern light. The entries painted a picture of a man who'd been utterly consumed by his discovery, but couldn't share it with anyone who'd understand. Date 2156. Recorded evidence of what I'm calling sympathetic resonance cascades. When I play certain tones in the chamber, the crystals respond by generating harmonics that shouldn't be possible given their size and structure. It's like they're amplifying sound through processes that violate known physics. I've tried to publish, but every journal rejects my submissions. They think I'm fabricating data. I think they're afraid of what the implications would mean. Day 3001. Victor came again, this time with men in suits. Geologists, he claimed, though they felt more like security. They offered $150,000 for the property and mineral rights. When I refused, Victor said I was standing in the way of progress. He said the crystals could revolutionize acoustic engineering, medical imaging, dozens of industries. Maybe he's right, but I've heard the caves sing. I know what lives in that harmony, and I won't let them reduce it to profit margins and quarterly reports. Diana closed the journal, understanding crystallizing. Marcus hadn't just been protecting unique minerals. He'd been protecting something that challenged fundamental assumptions about how sound, matter, and energy interacted. The scientific value alone would be staggering. But in the wrong hands, in Victor Castellanos' hands, it would just become another commodity to exploit until it was gone. Her phone rang, startling her, because she'd forgotten the number worked even without signal. Calls could still come through when you got close enough to town. The screen showed unknown caller. Ms. Chen? Victor Castellanos. I hope I'm not calling too late. Diana's pulse jumped. How did you get this number? Your attorney provided it. Professional courtesy. I wanted to reach out personally now that you've seen the property. I imagine it's not quite what you hoped for. His voice was smooth, practiced, the kind of voice that had closed thousands of deals. Diana kept hers neutral. It's interesting. That's diplomatic. Look, I know Howard mentioned my initial offer of $5,000. That was based on property value without inspection. Now that you've taken possession, I'm prepared to be more generous. $30,000, cash, transferred within 48 hours. You and your daughter could start fresh somewhere with actual infrastructure. $30,000. A month ago, that would have been transformative. Now it felt like an insult. I haven't decided what I'm doing yet. Ms. Chun, may I call you Diana? I understand you're in a difficult position. Divorce, financial hardship, a young daughter who needs stability. The trailer isn't suitable for a child. No school access, no medical facilities, complete isolation. You're not really considering staying there. The veiled threat made Diana's hands clench. My living situation isn't your concern. It becomes my concern when it affects business. That property has been tied up in Marcus's obsessive secrecy for 15 years. I've tried to acquire it legally and ethically, always offering fair market value. Your uncle's refusal to negotiate wasn't about protecting something precious. It was about mental illness. The man talked to rocks, Diana. He died alone in the desert because he couldn't accept reality. He died protecting something he believed in. He died for nothing. Those crystals are geological curiosities, nothing more. I have experts who've analyzed similar formations. The singing Marcus documented is just wind through caves combined with auditory pareidolia, the human tendency to find patterns in random noise. He wasted 15 years on a delusion. Diana thought about the chamber, about the waveforms on her phone, about the way Lily had heard the harmonics without prompting. If they're worthless, why offer $30,000? Silence stretched for 3 beats. When Victor spoke again, his tone had hardened. Salvage value. The trailer can be removed. The land has mineral rights that might be useful. I'm offering more than it's worth out of goodwill and, frankly, impatience. But Diana, understand this clearly. I will acquire that property eventually. You can profit from the sale now, or you can struggle for months before financial reality forces your hand anyway. There's no scenario where you keep that land long term. None. Is that a threat? It's a prediction based on economics. Think about your daughter. Make the smart choice. He ended the call before Diana could respond. She sat in the dark trailer, heart pounding, understanding with absolute clarity that Victor Castellanos knew exactly what was in that cave and had no intention of letting her keep it. $30,000 was nothing compared to what those crystals must be worth. The question was what they were actually worth and to whom. The next morning, Diana left Lily with Rita at the diner. The woman had offered childcare for free, seeming to understand that Diana needed time to figure things out, and went back to the cave with new purpose. She spent 6 hours exploring every tunnel, every chamber, taking samples of crystals, photographing formations, and documenting everything she could with her phone and Marcus's old digital camera. The main chamber was only the beginning. Behind it, smaller tunnels branched off like arteries, each containing their own crystal formations. And in one small alcove, hidden behind a false wall Marcus had constructed from local stone, Diana found what he'd really been protecting. The crystals here were different. Instead of clear or white, they were deep blue, almost black, and they hummed at frequencies so low Diana felt them in her chest rather than hearing them. Her phone's audio app went haywire, trying to record them, displaying waveforms that suggested infrasonic ranges below 20 hertz. Sound waves that humans couldn't consciously hear, but that affected the body at a cellular level. And stacked beside these special crystals were Marcus's research notes. Hundreds of pages documenting what he'd discovered over 15 years. Crystal growth patterns that shouldn't exist according to standard geological models. Acoustic properties that violated known physics. Evidence of something Marcus called quantum acoustic coupling, where sound waves seemed to interact with matter at the subatomic level, creating effects that bordered on impossible. Diana wasn't qualified to judge whether Marcus's theories were legitimate or delusion, but she knew people who were. Her old geology professor, Dr. Sarah Kim at Cal State, had specialized in crystallography. And there was Robert Chen, no relation, who'd gone from a graduate program to work at Los Alamos on acoustic defense systems. If the crystals had properties Marcus claimed, those people would know, and they'd know what they were worth. She photographed every page of Marcus's notes, uploaded everything to a cloud storage account at the library in Hollow Creek, where Rita helped her access a computer, and then sent careful, neutral emails to both professors. Inherited property with unusual crystal formations. Would appreciate expert opinion. Attached documentation. No rush. The responses came within hours. Dr. Kim's was professionally enthusiastic. Diana, these formations are extraordinary. If your uncle's observations are accurate, this represents potentially groundbreaking material science. I'd like to visit and collect samples for analysis. When would be convenient? Robert Chen's response was more guarded. Diana, whatever you do, don't let anyone know about this publicly yet. The acoustic properties Marcus documented have implications for defense applications and private sector R&D. There are people who would pay extraordinary amounts for exclusive access. Call me immediately. We need to discuss security protocols. Diana sat in Rita's back office, staring at both emails, understanding that she'd just confirmed her property was valuable beyond anything she'd imagined, and that people, possibly dangerous people, would want to control it. Her phone rang again. Victor Castellanos, third time in 2 days. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Diana, I'm disappointed you haven't accepted my offer. I'm increasing it to $50,000, but this is absolutely my final. I know what's in the cave. Silence. Then, carefully, I don't know what you mean. the resonance properties, the quantum acoustic effects. I know why you want it, and I know it's worth more than 50,000. So let's stop pretending this is about salvage value in real estate. I see. Victor's voice had lost all pretense of friendly negotiation. Then you understand that you're in over your head. You have no resources to develop this, no connections to monetize it legally, and no protection from people who'll take it by less legitimate means. I'm offering you an exit. Take it. Or what? Or I make a phone call, and by tomorrow morning you'll have bigger problems than money. There are federal regulations about private citizens possessing materials with potential defense applications. There are environmental protection laws that could shut down your access, pending reviews that take years. There are child welfare services that investigate parents keeping children in unsafe conditions. You're threatening to have my daughter taken away. I'm informing you of risks that exist independent of my actions. Sometimes circumstances align in unfortunate ways. Or they don't if people make smart choices. Diana ended the call before she said something she'd regret. Her hands shook with rage and fear, but underneath both was something harder. Determination. Marcus had resisted Victor for 15 years. If these crystals were as valuable as both professors seemed to think, then they were Diana's ticket out of poverty. Not by selling them to Victor, but by finding the right buyers, institutions that would pay fair value and use them responsibly. She just needed to protect them long enough to make that happen. That night, back at the trailer with Lily safe beside her, Diana drafted a plan. Step 1. Invite both professors to visit and provide independent assessments. Step 2. Contact university research departments and ethical corporations about partnership possibilities. Step 3. Document everything publicly enough that Victor couldn't make her disappear without questions. She was uploading her documentation to multiple cloud services when headlights swept across the trailer's window. Not Tom's truck, something bigger. An SUV pulled up and 3 men got out, silhouettes in the darkness, moving toward her door with purpose that made Diana's pulse spike. She grabbed Lily, pulling her daughter against her chest, phone in her other hand ready to call. Who? There was number 911 out here. No sheriff close enough to matter. She was alone with her 6-year-old daughter and 3 strange men approaching at midnight. The knock was polite. Miss Chen, we're not here to hurt you. We just need to talk about the cave. Victor sent us to make you understand why selling is your only option. Diana's voice came out steadier than she felt. I'm calling the sheriff. No signal out here. And Sheriff Martinez is a friend of Victor's. He won't help you. The door handle rattled. Locked but flimsy. Diana looked around the trailer for anything that could be used as a weapon and found Marcus's old mining pick mounted on the wall. She grabbed it, positioned herself between the door and Lily, and made a decision. If they came through that door, she'd fight. She'd lose. 3 grown men against 1 desperate mother. But she'd make enough noise that anyone within miles would hear. Except there was nobody within miles. That was the whole point of Victor sending them here. The rattling stopped. Miss Chun, let's not make this difficult. We have a contract here. Very generous terms. $50,000, signed tonight, and we leave peacefully. Or we can wait until you're too tired to resist, take what we need, and leave you to explain to authorities how you ended up with nothing. Your choice. Diana didn't answer. Lily was crying silently against her shoulder, and Diana's grip on the pick was cutting off circulation to her fingers. She had no way to win this. Even if she called the professors, even if she went public, Victor had resources she couldn't match. He could wait her out, threaten her, make life impossible until she folded. Unless. The thought crystallized with sudden clarity. Victor wanted the cave, but he wanted it quietly. He needed her to sell voluntarily, because taking it by force would create complications. Legal questions about ownership transfer, potential criminal investigations if she disappeared or got hurt. He'd spent 15 years trying to acquire this property legally because the illegal route carried risks he'd preferred to avoid. That was her leverage. Not the cave itself, but the threat of making his acquisition messy enough that he'd rather negotiate than fight. Diana set down the mining pick and opened the door, keeping the chain engaged so it would only open a crack. The lead man was maybe 40, expensive suit, and eyes that suggested he'd done this kind of work before. I'm not signing anything tonight. But tell Victor I'll negotiate tomorrow at the diner in Hollow Creek, noon, with witnesses present. If he actually wants this property, he'll do it right. And if anything happens to me or my daughter between now and then, I've sent documentation to people who'll make sure he regrets it. The man studied her face, then nodded slowly. Tomorrow, noon diner. But Ms. Chen, understand that Victor's patience is finite. He's made generous offers. Eventually, the offers stop and other methods begin. Tomorrow might be your last chance. They drove away, leaving Diana shaking so hard she had to sit down before her legs gave out. Lily clung to her, and Diana held her daughter close, promising silently that whatever happened, Lily would be safe. Even if that meant selling the cave and walking away from the only thing that could change their lives. But she didn't want to walk away. For the first time in years, Diana had found something that felt like purpose beyond just survival. Marcus had protected these crystals because they mattered, because they represented something rare and irreplaceable. And Diana, despite having no resources and no plan beyond desperate improvisation, wanted to finish what her uncle had started. She just needed to survive until tomorrow and hope that Rita was right about one thing. Victor Castellanos was a businessman, and businessmen preferred profit over violence when both options were available. Tomorrow she'd find out which version of Victor showed up to negotiate. Tonight, she reinforced the trailer's door and window locks, kept the mining pick within reach, and listened to the distant hum of crystals singing beneath the desert as she tried to find sleep that wouldn't come. Morning came too fast. Diana had managed maybe 3 hours of sleep, jolting awake at every sound. Wind against the trailer, rocks shifting in the cooling desert, her own fears manifesting as footsteps that weren't there. Lily woke with dark circles under her eyes, understanding without being told that last night had been dangerous. They walked to town in the early light, arriving at Rita's diner by 10:30. Rita took one look at Diana's face and poured coffee without asking, then sat Lily in the back booth with pancakes and cartoons on an old TV she kept for slow mornings. Victor's men came last night. Rita's jaw tightened. They hurt you, threatened, said I needed to sign contracts or face other methods. I told them we'd negotiate here at noon, public with witnesses. Smart. Victor's careful about his reputation in town. He won't try anything obvious with people watching. Rita paused, studying Diana. But you should know he owns the sheriff, half the county commissioners, and most of the business property around here. If this goes legal, he has advantages. Then I need to make sure it doesn't go legal. I need it to go public enough that he can't make me disappear without questions. Rita pulled out her phone. My nephew works for the Albuquerque Journal, crime and corruption beat. If Victor's threatening single mothers over property inheritance, that's a story. You willing to talk to press? Diana's instinct screamed caution. Going public meant exposing herself, inviting more attention than she could handle. But staying silent meant staying vulnerable. Yeah, after the meeting. Let's see what Victor actually wants first. Dr. Sarah Kim called 11:15, her voice carrying excitement that made Diana's exhausted brain struggle to focus. Diana, I've been reviewing your uncle's documentation all night. The crystal formations you described, if they're genuine, we're talking about Nobel Prize-level discoveries. Natural piezoelectric structures that generate coherent sound waves through mechanisms we don't understand. I'm flying out tomorrow with my research team. We need to examine this immediately. How much would something like this be worth? Scientifically? Invaluable? Commercially? Dr. Kim paused. Acoustic engineering companies would pay tens of millions just for exclusive study rights. Defense contractors working on sonic weapons would pay more. And that's before considering pharmaceutical companies researching ultrasound medical applications. Diana, if your uncle's data is accurate, you're sitting on one of the most significant mineralogical discoveries of the century. Tens of millions. Diana's hand trembled on the phone. What if someone wanted to buy it outright? The whole property. Then we're talking about whoever has the deepest pockets and the most to gain. But Diana, please don't sell until I've had a chance to assess it properly. Your uncle documented properties that could. change our understanding of how sound interacts with matter. This deserves to be studied, not just exploited. I'll wait for your assessment. But Dr. Kim, I'm in a dangerous situation here. The man trying to buy this property has made threats. If something happens to me, there's documentation. Diana, if you feel unsafe, contact authorities immediately. And send me copies of everything. I'll make sure your uncle's research is preserved regardless of what happens. Diana ended the call as Victor Castellanos' Mercedes pulled up outside the diner. Black, expensive, windows tinted dark enough to be illegal. He emerged wearing a suit that probably cost more than Diana had earned in the last 6 months. Accompanied by 2 men who looked like they'd been corporate lawyers in another life and private security in this one. Rita positioned herself behind the counter where the entire diner could see her, and a handful of locals who'd been having late breakfast suddenly became very interested in their coffee, lingering to watch whatever was about to unfold. Small-town theater, Diana realized. Everyone knew Victor's reputation, and everyone wanted to see if the single mother from out of state would stand up to him or fold. Victor sat across from Diana in a booth near the window, his men flanking but not crowding. Up close, he was older than Diana had expected, mid-60s, weathered in the way rich men got when they spent time outdoors for recreation rather than necessity. His eyes were sharp, calculating, the kind of eyes that measured everything in terms of value and leverage. Ms. Chen, I appreciate you agreeing to meet. I didn't agree. You sent men to threaten me into negotiating. A misunderstanding. Those men were overzealous contractors who misinterpreted their instructions. I've reprimanded them. His tone suggested he'd done no such thing. But we're here now. Let's discuss this rationally. Diana set her phone on the table, recording app visible and running. Victor noticed, but didn't object, smart enough to know that objecting would confirm he planned to say things he didn't want recorded. My final offer, $100,000, cash, transferred today. In exchange, you sign over the property, mineral rights, and any documentation your uncle left regarding the cave formations. Standard non-disclosure agreement prevents you from discussing details publicly. Clean, simple, everyone benefits. 100,000. 2 days ago, that would have seemed like salvation. Now it felt like an insult. Dr. Sarah Kim from Cal State says the acoustic properties alone are worth tens of millions to the right buyers. Victor's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Surprised that she'd contacted experts, or concerned that his window for acquiring this cheaply was closing. Dr. Kim is an academic. Academics overvalue things based on theoretical importance rather than practical market realities. Yes, the crystals have unusual properties, but monetizing those properties requires infrastructure, connections, years of research and development. You don't have that capacity, so you'd handle that for me? Out of generosity, out of business sense. I have relationships with companies that could utilize this technology. You have a trailer in the desert and $87. He leaned forward slightly. Diana, I know your situation. Divorced, unemployed, living in a structure without running water or electricity. You're one child welfare visit away from losing custody of your daughter. Take the money. Give Lily a real home, real stability. Or refuse and watch everything get worse while you cling to property you can't possibly keep. The threat to Lily made Diana's vision narrow. You're saying you'd call Child Protective Services if I don't sell? I'm saying CPS investigates on their own sometimes, especially when concerned citizens report unsafe living conditions. Victor's smile was thin. 100,000. Last offer. Expires when I walk out that door. Diana thought about Dr. Kim flying out tomorrow, about Robert Chen's email warning about defense applications and security protocols, about Marcus's journal entries documenting 15 years of refusing exactly this kind of pressure. Her uncle had died protecting these crystals from Victor. She could at least refuse him long enough to understand what she was actually giving up. No, I'm not selling today. Not to you, possibly not at all. I'm waiting for expert assessments and proper valuations. And if anything happens to me, if CPS suddenly gets anonymous tips, if I have any accidents or problems that feel convenient for you, I've sent documentation to people who'll make sure you're the first suspect. Victor stood slowly, buttoning his suit jacket with deliberate precision. You're making a mistake. 100,000 is more than you'll see from anyone else once I explain the legal complications around this property. Mineral rights disputes, environmental protection concerns, potential federal interest in materials with defense applications. These things tie up properties for years. You'll spend whatever you might theoretically make on legal fees, and meanwhile, you're still homeless. Then that's my choice to make. It was. Victor nodded to his men, and they moved toward the door. But he paused, looking back at Diana with an expression that might have been respect or might have been calculation. Your uncle was stubborn, too. He chose isolation and poverty over compromise. He died alone, unmourned, with nothing to show for his principles except rocks in a cave that nobody will remember. Is that really what you want for yourself? For Lily? The question landed harder than Diana expected because it touched something she'd been trying not to think about. What if she was wrong? What if the crystals weren't actually worth what Dr. Kim suggested? What if Victor was right and she was choosing principle over practicality, risking her daughter's well-being for pride? But then she remembered the chamber, the harmonics that her phone had recorded, the way the crystals had sung frequencies that shouldn't exist naturally. Marcus hadn't been crazy. He'd been protecting something real. And Diana would be damned if she let Victor rewrite that story. My uncle died protecting something that mattered more than money. If that's his legacy, I'll take it. Victor left without another word, and Diana sat there shaking until Rita brought fresh coffee and squeezed her shoulder with a hand that said she'd done the right thing, even if the right thing was terrifying. The locals who'd been watching started talking again, their conversations carrying a new tone. Respect, maybe. The outsider had stood up to Victor Castellanos and lived to tell about it. That counted for something in a town small enough that everyone knew everyone else's business. Dr. Sarah Kim arrived the next afternoon with 3 graduate students and equipment that looked like it belonged on a space mission. Ground-penetrating radar, portable spectrometers, acoustic analysis tools that Diana couldn't identify. They descended on the cave like archaeologists at a newly discovered tomb, documenting everything with the kind of reverence usually reserved for religious sites. Diana watched from the entrance as Dr. Kim examined the main chamber, running her hands over crystal formations with an expression of wonder that was almost childlike. Hexagonal structures with internal geometries that suggest quantum-level organization. Diana, these crystals aren't just growing randomly. They're organizing themselves according to acoustic principles, like they're building natural resonance chambers that optimize for specific frequencies. Is that possible? According to everything I learned in graduate school, no. But according to what I'm measuring right now, yes. Dr. Kim pulled up data on her tablet, showing waveforms and frequency analyses that meant nothing to Diana, but clearly excited the graduate students crowding around. Your uncle's documentation was accurate. These formations are producing coherent sound waves at frequencies that correspond to what's called the solfeggio scale, ancient tones that some researchers believe have biological effects on human cells. One of the graduate students, young and enthusiastic, looked up from his equipment. Dr. Kim, the resonance chamber is amplifying frequencies in the infrasonic and ultrasonic ranges too. This isn't just audible sound. It's a complete spectrum acoustic system. Diana's geology degree had been general rather than specialized, but she understood enough to grasp the implications. Sound waves that affected matter at multiple frequencies, crystals that organized themselves into structures that optimized acoustic properties. This wasn't just unusual. This was paradigm shifting. What would happen if someone wanted to extract these crystals? Mine them out. Dr. Kim's expression darkened. The chamber works as an integrated system. Remove crystals and you disrupt the resonance patterns. The whole thing would become acoustically inert, just expensive quartz. The value isn't in individual crystals, it's in the system itself, which means you can't move it, can't replicate it, can only study it in situ. So Victor can't just buy the property and strip it. He could try, but he'd destroy the thing that makes it valuable. The only way to monetize this is through controlled access, research partnerships, licensing agreements, study contracts. Which means you have leverage, Diana. This system only works here, in this specific geological formation. Victor needs your cooperation whether he wants to admit it or not. That night, after Dr. Kim's team had set up camp near the trailer and filled the evening with excited discussions about research papers and grant applications, Diana sat with Lily on the trailer steps and tried to explain what was happening in terms a 6-year-old could understand. The crystals Uncle Marcus protected are very special. Scientists say they're important for understanding how sound works. Are we going to be rich? Diana pulled her daughter close. Maybe, but more important, we're going to make sure what Uncle Marcus discovered gets used the right way. For science and helping people, not just for money. Victor wants to use it the wrong way. Kids were perceptive like that. Yeah, baby. I think he does. Then we have to stop him. Diana smiled despite everything. 6 years old and already understanding that some fights were worth having. Yeah, I think we do. Robert Chen arrived 2 days later, not with graduate students, but with men in suits who introduced themselves as representatives from Los Alamos National Laboratory and a private defense contractor Diana had never heard of. They examined the cave with the kind of clinical efficiency that made Dr. Kim's team look like tourists. And when they emerged, Robert pulled Diana aside with an expression that was both excited and deeply concerned. Diana, I need you to understand something. Those crystals aren't just scientifically interesting. They have immediate military applications. Acoustic weapons, sonar stealth technology, possibly even quantum communication systems. The defense implications are staggering. Meaning what? Meaning this could be classified as dual-use technology with national security concerns. The government could potentially seize the property under eminent domain or classify access so tightly that you'd never benefit from it. Diana felt cold despite the desert heat. They could just take it. If they determine it's a security risk in private hands, yes. But there's another option. License the research to government-approved contractors through negotiated agreements that compensate you fairly while allowing controlled study. That way you profit, the research continues, and nobody gets shut out by classification. How much profit are we talking about? Robert looked uncomfortable, like the numbers were too large to say casually. Initial assessments suggest licensing fees in the range of $5 to $10 million annually for exclusive study rights. If the applications pan out, ongoing royalties could be 10 times that. Diana, we're talking about technology that could change acoustic engineering fundamentally. Companies would pay billions for access. Billions. The word didn't feel real. Diana had spent the last year worrying about whether she could afford to keep Lily fed, whether the eviction notice meant sleeping in their car, whether her ex-husband's abandoned responsibilities would crush them. Now, someone was saying words like billions in connection with property she'd inherited from an uncle she barely remembered. What about Victor Castellanos? He's been trying to buy this for 15 years. Victor's a mining operator with connections to some unsavory international buyers. If he got control, those crystals would end up in Chinese or Russian research labs within months, totally outside U.S. oversight. That's exactly the scenario the government wants to prevent. So if I'm caught between Victor trying to steal it and the government trying to classify it, where you work with people who can protect your interests while ensuring the technology gets developed responsibly. Let me set up meetings with the right contractors, the ones who will pay fair value and follow regulations. You'll need lawyers, good ones, but I can recommend firms who specialize in dual-use technology licensing. Diana looked back at the trailer where Lily was drawing pictures, at the cave entrance where Dr. Kim's team was still documenting formations, at the desert stretching empty and beautiful in every direction. 3 weeks ago, she had nothing. Now, she had something so valuable that nations wanted control of it. And Victor Castellanos still wanted to take it from her. That night, Victor made his next move. Diana was reviewing documents Dr. Kim had prepared. Preliminary research proposals, suggested partnership structures, contact information for university and corporate research divisions, when headlights swept across the trailer again. But this time, it wasn't Victor's Mercedes. It was Sheriff Martinez's cruiser. The sheriff was maybe 50, overweight, with the kind of tired eyes that said he'd stopped caring about justice years ago, and now just processed paperwork. He knocked politely, waited for Diana to open the door, and delivered his message with bureaucratic neutrality. Ms. Chen, I'm here regarding complaints about child endangerment. We've received reports that you're housing a minor in a structure without adequate utilities, no running water, no electricity, in violation of New Mexico child welfare statutes. Diana's heart stopped. Victor had actually done it. Those complaints came from Victor Castellanos. The complainant's identity is confidential, but I'm required to conduct a welfare check. May I see your daughter? Diana wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him to get a warrant, but she knew how this worked. Refusal would be reported as obstruction, used as evidence that she was hiding something. She let him in, showed him where Lily slept, explained the water collection system, the camp stove, the food supplies. Sheriff Martinez made notes with the enthusiasm of someone filling out forms rather than protecting children. Ms. Chun, I'm going to recommend a full CPS investigation. Living conditions here don't meet minimum standards for child housing. You'll be contacted within 48 hours about compliance requirements and possible temporary custody arrangements. Temporary custody means taking my daughter away. It means ensuring she has safe accommodation while you bring this property up to code. Running water, electricity, proper sanitation. If you can't provide that, CPS will place her with foster care until you can. Diana felt everything collapsing. The research opportunities, the potential millions, the chance to finish what Marcus started. None of it mattered if she lost Lily. How long do I have to bring it up to code? Standard timeline is 30 days for initial improvements, 90 days for full compliance. But Ms. Chun, getting utilities out here would cost tens of thousands of dollars. The power company would need to run lines 5 miles, dig a well, install septic systems. You're looking at $50,000 to $70,000 minimum, and that's if contractors are willing to work this far out. Victor's strategy was elegant in its cruelty. He couldn't force her to sell, so he created a situation where keeping the property was financially impossible. Even if she had licensing agreements pending, even if millions were theoretically coming, she didn't have $50,000 today. And without it, CPS would take Lily. Sheriff Martinez left with promises to file his report, and Diana sat in the dark trailer, trying not to break down completely. Lily was with Dr. Kim's team at their camp, looking at stars through a telescope, unaware her mother was being backed into corners from every angle. Rita called an hour later, her voice tight with anger. Victor's bragging at the bar about how he's got you cornered. Says by next week you'll be selling for $30,000 just to cover the legal bills and utility costs. Diana, what do you need? A miracle. $50,000 in 30 days, or CPS takes Lily. What if we crowdfund it? Local support, internet campaign? You stood up to Victor. People here respect that. Crowdfunding takes time, and there's no guarantee it would work. I need solutions I can count on. Dr. Kim appeared at the trailer door, having walked over from camp. I heard part of your call. Diana, the university can advance research funds against future licensing agreements. Not $50,000, but maybe $20,000. And I know contractors who owe me favors. We could get water and power out here for less than the sheriff quoted, if we're creative. Why would you do that? Because your uncle protected this discovery for 15 years, and because watching Victor Castellanos win through intimidation makes me sick. Let me make some calls. By morning, Dr. Kim had assembled a solution that felt like desperation held together with academic favors and moral outrage. The university would advance $30,000 against future fees. A contractor friend who'd worked on remote field stations would install a solar power system and atmospheric water generator for $25,000, taking the balance as deferred payment. Rita offered the trailer's back room as temporary housing for Diana and Lily while the work was done. 2 weeks, maybe 3. It wasn't perfect. Diana would be deeply in debt even before licensing agreements were finalized. But it kept Lily safe and the property in her control long enough to complete proper valuations. She called Robert Chen with the plan, and he added another piece. Los Alamos wants preliminary study access. They'll pay $100,000 for 3 months of supervised research, non-exclusive rights. Contract would be fast-tracked, funded within 2 weeks. That covers your improvement costs and gives you cushion for legal fees. $100,000 in 2 weeks. Diana's brain struggled to process timelines where money appeared in weeks rather than months or years. What's the catch? They get priority access if the government decides to classify any findings. But Diana, that was going to happen anyway. This way you get compensated rather than just shut out. She agreed to all of it. The university advance, the contractor's creative financing, the Los Alamos preliminary contract. Within 48 hours, she had signed more paperwork than she'd seen in her entire life. Each document promising money or services or access rights that would have seemed impossible a week ago. Victor called that afternoon, his voice carrying surprise and frustration. I underestimated you. Most people would have folded by now. Most people aren't protecting what my uncle died for. Your uncle died for nothing, Diana. He wasted 15 years in the desert talking to rocks while the world moved on without him. You're doing the same thing, fighting battles you can't win, making enemies you can't afford. Is there a point to this call? The point is that I'm increasing my offer one final time. $500,000. Today. Walk away. Take your daughter somewhere safe. Let someone with resources handle the complexity. Or keep fighting and watch everything fall apart when the government classifies this and you're left with nothing but legal bills. $500,000. 2 weeks ago, it would have been transformative. Now it felt like Victor admitting he'd lost leverage and was trying desperation tactics. How do you even know Los Alamos is involved? Silence. Then, carefully, I have sources. And I'm warning you as someone who's been in this business 40 years. Government involvement means you've already lost control. They'll classify everything, tie you up in red tape, and pay you pennies while using your discovery for weapons research you'll never see or benefit from. That's still better than selling to you and watching it disappear into foreign research labs. Victor's laugh was bitter. You think the government is more ethical than I am? They're just better at paperwork. But fine, keep your principles. When this collapses and you need someone to buy you out of the mess, call me. I'll still make an offer, though it won't be $500,000 anymore. He ended the call, and Diana sat there feeling less victorious than exhausted. Every win created new complications. Every step forward revealed more complexity she didn't understand. But Lily was safe, the property was still hers, and actual money was arriving to keep everything from collapsing. That was enough for today. The contractor, a weatherman named Jack who'd built research stations in Alaska and Chilean deserts, arrived with a crew and started work within a week. Solar panels went up on the mesa behind the trailer, oriented to catch maximum sun. An atmospheric water generator hummed to life, pulling moisture from air and filling tanks with potable water. Gray water systems recycled everything possible. Within 2 weeks, the trailer had electricity and running water, and the toilet was no longer a chemical bucket, but a composting system that actually worked. Sheriff Martinez conducted his follow-up inspection with visible disappointment, checking boxes on his form that confirmed the property now met minimum standards. CPS closed their investigation with a note that Diana had adequately remediated deficiencies, and Lily stayed with her mother. Dr. Kim's research team expanded to 8 people working in rotating shifts, documenting crystal formations and measuring acoustic properties with equipment that arrived weekly. The preliminary findings went into reports that Diana couldn't fully understand, but that generated excited emails from institutions around the world. MIT wants study access. Stanford's acoustic engineering department offered $200,000 for a semester of graduate student research time. Diana, your uncle discovered something that's going to be referenced in textbooks for generations. But the more valuable the discovery became publicly, the more desperate Victor's tactics grew. The sheriff started citing Diana for code violations, parking infractions, fire hazard concerns, noise complaints from neighbors who didn't exist. Each citation required legal response. Each response cost money, and Diana began to understand that Victor's strategy had shifted from trying to buy the property to making ownership so expensive and complicated that she'd be forced to sell anyway. She hired a lawyer, Rachel Morrison, recommended by Robert Chen, who specialized in dual-use technology and government contracts. Rachel was expensive but competent, handling each of Victor's legal harassments with motions that got them dismissed while building a case that Victor was engaged in systematic interference with property rights. He's crossed lines that give us counterclaim options, Rachel explained during a video call. Witness intimidation, abuse of process, possibly conspiracy with local officials. But Diana, litigation takes time and money. Even if you win, you're spending resources on fighting Victor instead of developing the property. What's the alternative? Make him irrelevant. Sign enough legitimate research contracts that his offers don't matter anymore. Establish the cave as a protected scientific resource with enough institutional backing that he can't touch it without taking on Harvard, MIT, Los Alamos, and the United States government simultaneously. That's your endgame. Make the property so valuable and so publicly important that Victor becomes a footnote. Diana liked that strategy. Not just beating Victor, but making him irrelevant. She signed contracts with 3 more research institutions, each paying between $50,000 and $200,000 for multi-year study access. The money started arriving, and for the first time since the divorce, Diana's bank account had numbers that didn't feel desperate. She bought a used truck, nothing fancy, but reliable enough to make the drive to town without worrying about breakdowns. She paid Rita back for housing them during construction. She bought Lily new clothes that actually fit and toys that weren't from thrift stores. Small victories that felt enormous after a year of scarcity. And every night, she walked to the cave entrance and listened to the crystals sing their harmonics in the darkness, understanding why Marcus had chosen this over comfort. The sound wasn't just beautiful, it was true. Pure frequencies that existed independent of human need or desire, just being what they were without compromise. 6 months after inheriting the property, Diana received a call that changed everything. Dr. Kim's voice carried an excitement that was almost manic. "Diana, we found something. Behind the main chamber, there's a deeper section your uncle didn't document fully. The crystals, they're different, black quartz formations with properties we can't explain. And Diana, they're not just resonating. They're generating power." "What do you mean, generating power?" "Acoustic to electrical conversion at efficiencies that shouldn't be possible. The black crystals are taking sound waves and somehow transforming them into measurable electrical current. If we can understand the mechanism, replicate it, Diana, this could be revolutionary for renewable energy." Diana drove out immediately, met Dr. Kim at the cave, and descended with her into sections she'd never fully explored. Past the main chamber, through a narrow tunnel Marcus had marked but not described, into a space where the crystals grew in formations that looked less like geology and more like circuitry. The black crystals hummed at frequencies so low Diana felt them in her bones rather than hearing them. And around them, subtle blue lights flickered, not external, not for flashlights, but from the crystals themselves, like they were channeling energy from sources Diana couldn't identify. "This is what Victor really wants," Dr. Kim said, her voice hushed with something like reverence. "Not the acoustic properties in the main chamber. This, power generation from sound. If this can be scaled, commercialized, we're talking about technology worth hundreds of millions." Diana touched one of the black crystals gently, felt it thrumming against her palm like a living thing. "How much is hundreds of millions?" Dr. Kim pulled up calculations on her tablet. "Based on energy conversion efficiency, we're measuring and assuming scalability, licensing this technology to power companies and tech manufacturers, conservative estimate, $600 million over the next decade." "Diana, your uncle found the holy grail of acoustic physics and didn't tell anyone. $600 million. The number was too large to feel real." Diana stood in the darkness, surrounded by crystals that had formed over millions of years, that her uncle had protected for 15, that now represented more money than she could conceive of. And all she could think was that Marcus had lived in poverty protecting this, had died alone in a trailer worth $850, never knowing that what he'd guarded would be worth more than small nations. We need to secure this immediately, Dr. Kim continued. Patent applications, security protocols, controlled access. Diana, as soon as word gets out about this, every energy company and defense contractor on the planet will want a piece. You need lawyers, security, proper institutional partners. And Victor's going to lose his mind when he finds out. He's been trying to buy this for 15 years, thinking it was just unusual crystals. When he realizes it's actually breakthrough energy technology worth hundreds of millions, he'll escalate beyond anything he's done so far. Diana looked at the black crystals, at the faint blue light they generated from nothing but sound and stone, and made a decision. Then we move fast. File everything, lock down access, sign partnership agreements with institutions that can protect this. And we go public, press conferences, academic papers. Make this so visible that Victor can't bury it or steal it without the whole world watching. Dr. Kim smiled. Your uncle will be proud. He protected it in secret. You're going to protect it by making it impossible to hide. They climbed back to the surface as dawn broke over the desert, painting the landscape in golds and purples. Lily was awake, playing with blocks Rita had given her, and Diana pulled her daughter close, holding her tight against the certainty that everything was about to get much harder before it got better. Mama, why are you crying? Because we're going to be okay, baby. Really okay. Uncle Marcus left us something amazing, and we're going to make sure it helps people instead of just making someone rich. Victor doesn't get to win. Not after everything Uncle Marcus gave up to stop him. Lily considered this with the seriousness she brought to important questions. Good. I don't like Victor. Diana laughed despite everything, despite the exhaustion and the coming battles and the certainty that Victor Castellanos would escalate to levels she couldn't predict. Yeah, baby. Me neither. The sun rose higher, warming the desert, and Diana watched Dr. Kim's team preparing for another day of documentation and thought about Marcus dying alone, unrecognized, protecting something the world didn't know existed. That was ending today. By this afternoon, she'd have called press conferences and filed patents and done everything necessary to make sure Marcus Chen's 15 years of lonely vigil weren't forgotten. His name would be on papers and acknowledgments and the technology that changed acoustic physics forever. And Victor Castellanos would finally understand that some things couldn't be bought, stolen, or intimidated away. Some things you had to earn through sacrifice and stubbornness and refusing to quit when quitting would be easier. Diana had learned that from Marcus. Now she'd teach it to Victor. The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. at the University of New Mexico's Press Center, 2 weeks after Dr. Kim's discovery of the power-generating black crystals. Diana had spent those 14 days in a blur of legal meetings, patent filings, and interviews with institutions that wanted partnership access. Rachel Morrison had coordinated everything with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before, though even she admitted this was the largest dual-use technology case she'd ever handled. We're filing patents in 17 countries simultaneously, Rachel explained the night before. The applications cover the acoustic-to-electrical conversion process, the specific crystal configurations, and the potential applications. Estimated value, if everything is approved and licensed commercially, we're looking at $608 million over the next 15 years. $608 million. Diana had stopped trying to make the number feel real. Instead, she focused on what she could control, protecting Lily, honoring Marcus's legacy, and making sure Victor Castellanos didn't destroy what they were building. Victor had been ominously quiet for the past 2 weeks. No more legal harassments, no more escalating offers, no midnight visits from men in expensive suits. Rachel said that was the dangerous kind of quiet, the kind that came before desperate people did desperate things. He knows something's happening. His sources will have told him about the Los Alamos contract, the institutional partnerships. He's planning something big, so we need to move fast and make this so public that whatever he tries backfires. The press center was packed. Local news from Albuquerque, regional papers, and, to Diana's shock, national media. The Associated Press, Reuters, even a CNN science correspondent who'd driven up from their Denver bureau. Dr. Kim stood at the podium with Diana beside her, Robert Chen, and representatives from Los Alamos flanking them. Dr. Kim began with a scientific explanation, describing the cave's unique acoustic properties and language that made reporters lean forward and start typing urgently. Natural resonance chambers that produced harmonics at specific frequencies. Crystal formations that defied conventional geological models. 15 years of documentation by a civilian researcher who'd never sought recognition. Then she dropped the revelation that made camera flashes intensify. 2 weeks ago, we discovered a secondary chamber containing what we're calling black quartz formations. Crystal structures that convert acoustic energy into measurable electrical current at efficiencies of approximately 43%. For context, the best human-engineered piezoelectric materials achieve roughly 30% efficiency. These natural formations exceed our technology by more than 40%. The room erupted in questions. Dr. Kim fielded them with academic precision, explaining potential applications, renewable energy generation, medical imaging advancement, acoustic weapons development. Each answer made the discovery sound more valuable, more transformative. Then it was Diana's turn. She stepped to the microphone with hands shaking but voice steady, looking at the cameras and thinking about Marcus dying alone, about every time Victor had threatened her, about sleeping in a laundromat with $87 and no future. My uncle, Marcus Chen, discovered this cave 15 years ago while conducting geological surveys. He spent the rest of his life protecting it, documenting it, refusing offers from developers who wanted to exploit it. He died in poverty, alone, because he believed this discovery was too important to be controlled by people who would prioritize profit over science. She pulled out Marcus's journal, the one with his final entries. 3 months before he died, my uncle wrote, "The crystals sing truths that money can't measure. If I've learned anything in 15 years, it's that some things are worth protecting even when protection costs everything." He left me this property not because we were close, I barely knew him, but because he believed I'd continue what he started. Diana looked directly at the cameras. Today we're announcing partnership agreements with 7 research institutions, patent applications for the acoustic-to-electrical conversion technology, and the establishment of the Marcus Chen Research Foundation, which will ensure this discovery benefits humanity rather than being buried or monopolized. The estimated commercial value of these technologies, based on licensing agreements already negotiated, is $608 million over the next 15 years. The number landed like a bomb. Reporters shouted questions over each other. Diana answered what she could, deflected what she couldn't, and made sure every answer reinforced the same points. Marcus had protected this for 15 years. It was now secured through proper channels, and anyone attempting to interfere would face legal consequences and public scrutiny. She didn't mention Victor by name. She didn't have to. Every reporter in New Mexico knew who'd been trying by Marcus's property for 15 years. Every question about previous acquisition attempts was really asking about Victor Castellanos, and Diana's carefully neutral responses, my uncle refused numerous offers from developers who didn't understand the scientific value. Let journalists draw their own conclusions. The press conference ended after 90 minutes. Diana stepped down from the podium exhausted, but feeling something she hadn't felt since before the divorce. Powerful. Not because of the money, though that certainly helped, but because she just made Victor's worst nightmare come true. The cave was public knowledge now. Trying to steal it or bury it would be pointless. The technology was patented, the research was distributed across multiple institutions, and the world was watching. Rita called within an hour. "You're on every news channel. CNN's calling it the most significant acoustic physics discovery in 50 years. Victor's at the bar drinking bourbon at noon. Diana, I've never seen him like this. Defeated. But defeated men were dangerous." Rachel had warned her about that. People who'd lost everything had nothing left to lose. Diana made sure Lily stayed with Dr. Kim's team at the university campus, where security could monitor her, while Diana returned to the property to check on the cave and make sure nothing had been disturbed during her absence. The drive took 2 hours, and she arrived at sunset to find Victor's Mercedes parked beside her trailer. Her pulse spiked. She'd told security about the press conference, told them to watch for Victor, but the property was remote enough that response time would be measured in tens of minutes, not seconds. She approached carefully, phone in hand with one already dialed but not yet sent. Victor sat on the trailer steps, holding something in his hands that Diana couldn't immediately identify. He looked up when she approached, and Diana was shocked by his appearance. He'd always been polished, controlled, but now his suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened, and his eyes carried a wildness that suggested he'd spent the afternoon drinking away his fury. $608 million. His voice was rough. You had $850 of property and turned it into $608 million. Do you have any idea what I could have done with this? Diana stopped 15 feet away, keeping distance. Built a mining operation that destroyed it within a year and made you maybe $50 million? Yeah, I know. I could have made billions. Clean energy technology, defense contracts, medical applications. I have connections you can't imagine. But no, you gave it away to universities and government labs who'll bury it in red tape and academic politics. They'll study it properly, develop it responsibly. Victor laughed, bitter and broken. Responsibly. Your uncle said the same thing. Said I didn't understand that some things were more important than profit. He died with nothing, Diana. Nothing but rocks in a cave and journals nobody read. Is that what you want? My uncle died protecting something that mattered. That's more than most people accomplish. He died alone. Victor stood, swaying slightly, and Diana's hand tightened on her phone. He had no family, no friends, no one who mourned him beyond some crazy lady in town who brings flowers to his grave once a month. 15 years in the desert protecting crystals that don't care whether he lived or died. And you're doing the same thing, sacrificing everything for principles that won't keep you warm at night when this all collapses. It's not collapsing. It's just beginning. Victor took a step forward and Diana stepped back, maintaining distance. You humiliated me today, in front of everyone. The press is calling me the developer who couldn't recognize a $600 million discovery when he tried to buy it for $5,000. Do you know what that does to my reputation? My credibility? I didn't mention your name once. You didn't have to. Everyone knows I've been trying to buy this property. Now, on the punchline. The mining operator who got outsmarted by a broke single mother with a geology degree she never used. He fumbled in his pocket and pulled out what he'd been holding. A flask. He took a long drink. I built my company over 40 years. 40 years of acquisitions and development and making the tough calls that bleeding hearts like you can't stomach. And you destroyed it in 2 weeks with a press conference. Diana's fear was being replaced by something else. Not quite pity. Victor didn't deserve that, but recognition that she was watching someone's life collapse in real time. I didn't destroy anything. You did that yourself when you chose intimidation over legitimate negotiation. I offered you money, repeatedly, generous amounts that would have changed your life. You offered me fractions of what it was worth while threatening to take my daughter away if I didn't sell. That's not negotiation, Victor. That's extortion. He stared at her with eyes that couldn't quite focus, bourbon and rage combining into something volatile. Your uncle ruined my father. Did you know that? 1975, my father found out about the cave, tried to acquire the land for development. Marcus refused, spread rumors that we were trying to exploit sensitive geological features. Environmental groups got involved, held up our projects for 3 years. We lost millions in delayed development and legal fees. My father spent his last years bitter and broke, and it was Marcus's fault. Diana hadn't known that. Marcus's journals mentioned William Castellanos, but not the full context. So this was revenge? 40 years of trying to buy this property was about payback. It was about justice, taking back what your uncle stole from my family. Victor's voice cracked. And you took it from me. $608 million that should have been mine. It was never yours. It was Marcus's. Now it's mine, and I'm using it the way he wanted, for science, not profit. Noble words from someone who just became worth $600 million. Victor took another drink from his flask. Don't pretend you're better than me, Diana. You're going to love the money just as much as I would have. The only difference is you get to feel morally superior while spending it. Maybe he was right. Maybe in 5 years, Diana would look back and realize she'd been just as motivated by wealth as Victor, just better at justifying it. But right now, standing in the desert with Lily safe and Marcus's legacy protected, she didn't feel greedy. She felt like she'd honored a debt to someone she'd never really known, but who'd given her everything. You need to leave, Victor. This property is mine legally, and you're trespassing. He laughed again, that same broken sound. Trespassing. After 15 years of negotiations and offers and trying to do this the right way. But fine, I'm leaving. Not just your property, New Mexico. Maybe the country. There's nothing left for me here. He walked to his Mercedes, stumbled slightly, and Diana almost called out to suggest he shouldn't drive. But Victor had made his choices, and she couldn't protect him from consequences. He drove away slowly, headlights cutting through the gathering dark, and Diana stood watching until they disappeared. Then she called Rachel to report the encounter, called security to increase patrols, and called Rita to check that Lily was safe at the university. Everything was fine. Everything was secured. Victor was gone, and the cave was protected, and $608 million was being processed through licensing agreements that would transform Diana's life and Lily's future. So why did Diana feel so hollow? She walked to the cave entrance, unlocked the steel door, and descended into darkness that felt familiar now. Safe. The crystals hummed their eternal harmonics, indifferent to human drama, just being what they were. Diana sat on the smooth stone floor of the main chamber and let herself cry. Not from sadness exactly, but from the release of 6 months of pressure. 6 months ago, she'd been counting $87 in a laundromat, contemplating homelessness, watching her daughter learn to sleep on plastic chairs. Now she had partnerships with Los Alamos and MIT, patent applications worth hundreds of millions, and her name mentioned alongside her uncles in articles about groundbreaking discoveries. But Marcus had spent 15 years alone in this cave, protecting it from people like Victor, and he'd died with nothing. And Diana was terrified that despite all her success, despite doing everything right, she was still somehow failing the test Marcus had left her. The crystals sang, frequencies layering into harmonies that shouldn't exist naturally, and Diana listened until her breathing calmed and perspective returned. Marcus hadn't died with nothing. He died protecting something irreplaceable, and Diana had completed his work by making sure that protection became permanent. That was enough. That had to be enough. The months following the press conference transformed Diana's life in ways both obvious and subtle. The money arrived gradually. Initial licensing payments, research grants, partnership advances, until her bank account showed numbers that still didn't feel real. She paid off every debt, closed accounts that had haunted her with negative balances and overdraft fees. She bought a Real house in Albuquerque. Nothing extravagant, just 3 bedrooms with a yard where Lily could play, and kept the trailer property as a research base where Dr. Kim's team had established permanent operations. The cave itself was now protected under federal scientific preservation statutes, accessible only to authorized researchers, with security that would make a military base envious. Lily enrolled in a private school with small classes and actual art programs, and Diana watched her daughter transform from a child who'd learned not to ask for things into a kid who occasionally complained about homework and wanted the latest toy. Normal complaints. Normal childhood. It was the most beautiful thing Diana had ever seen. She hired a financial advisor who specialized in sudden wealth. Apparently, there was an entire industry devoted to helping people who'd inherited or won fortunes avoid destroying themselves, and learn about trusts and investments and how to ensure that $600 million became generational wealth rather than just one generation's extravagance. The Marcus Chen Research Foundation launched officially 8 months after the press conference, funded by 10% of Diana's licensing revenues. Its mission: supporting independent researchers who couldn't get institutional funding, particularly those studying phenomena that challenge conventional scientific models. Marcus would have appreciated that, making sure the outsiders and the weird thinkers had resources to pursue ideas that mainstream academia dismissed. Dr. Kim became the foundation's first research director, leaving her university position to focus full-time on studying the cave's properties and mentoring graduate students. Robert Chen joined the board, ensuring the foundation maintained connections to legitimate research institutions while avoiding the kind of military-only focus that Marcus had feared. And slowly, carefully, Diana began reaching out to other members of Marcus's distant family. Cousins she'd never met, aunts and uncles who'd written off Marcus as crazy years ago. She invited them to the foundation's dedication ceremony, showed them Marcus's journals, explained what he'd actually been doing in the desert for 15 years. Some of them apologized. Some didn't. But they all signed the memorial wall Diana had commissioned, a stone monument near the cave entrance with Marcus's name and the quote from his journal. The crystals sing truths that money can't measure. One cousin, an elderly woman named Patricia who'd been Marcus's childhood friend, pulled Diana aside after the ceremony. I tried to visit him once, maybe 10 years ago. He wouldn't let me into the cave, said it wasn't safe. I thought he'd lost his mind, that he was living in a fantasy to avoid dealing with life. I'm sorry I didn't understand. He made it hard to understand. He was protecting something but couldn't tell anyone what or why. That's a lonely way to live. But he was right. About the crystals, about their importance, about refusing to sell to Victor. Patricia touched the memorial wall. Marcus always said the desert teaches you what's real and what's not. I guess he learned that better than the rest of us. Diana thought about that often in the months that followed. What's real versus what's not. Money felt real when you didn't have it and abstract when you did. But the cave, the crystals, the harmonics, the impossible physics that Dr. Kim's team was still trying to explain, that was real in a way that transcended value. Victor Castellanos disappeared from New Mexico entirely. Rita heard rumors he'd moved to Arizona, then Nevada, then somewhere in South America. His company was sold to pay debts and legal settlements from various projects that had failed after his reputation collapsed. The man who'd terrorized Diana and threatened to take her daughter away was gone. Not defeated in some dramatic confrontation, but simply erased by the natural consequences of his own actions. Sometimes Diana wondered if she should feel more victorious about that. But mostly she just felt grateful it was over. Lily turned 7, then 8. She visited the cave regularly with Dr. Kim's team, learning about crystal formations and acoustic physics with the unself-conscious enthusiasm of children who haven't learned yet that science is supposed to be boring. She'd tell her classmates about the singing rocks her great-uncle discovered, and Diana would get calls from teachers asking if this was real or childish fantasy. "It's real," Diana would say. "Very real. We can arrange a field trip if you're interested." 3 schools took her up on it. Watching second graders experience the cave's harmonics for the first time, their faces lighting up with wonder as they felt the crystal's vibrations in their bones, became one of Diana's favorite things. Marcus had died alone, but his discovery was now something children learned about, scientists studied, and the world recognized as important. That felt like victory more than any dollar amount. 2 years after the press conference, Dr. Kim called with news that made Diana's heart race despite having thought she was beyond being surprised by the cave's properties. "Diana, we've been analyzing the black crystal's power generation at different frequencies. When we expose them to specific harmonic combinations, the ones Marcus documented most frequently in his journals, the electrical output increases by 300%. It's like the crystals are designed to respond to specific sound patterns." "Designed? You mean naturally evolved?" "That's the thing. The optimization is too precise for random geological processes. Either these formations are far more sophisticated than we understood, or—" Dr. Kim paused. "Or they weren't entirely natural." "Diana, I'm not saying aliens, but I am saying we need to seriously consider that these crystals might have been influenced by intelligence we don't yet understand." Diana processed this carefully. "You're telling me my uncle discovered not just unusual minerals, but potentially evidence of what? Ancient civilizations? Non-human engineering? I'm saying the more we study this, the less we understand how it could have formed naturally." And Marcus's journal suggests he suspected this too. Look at his final entries. He kept referencing intentional design and purposeful arrangement. He knew these formations didn't make geological sense. Diana asked the question she'd been avoiding for 2 years. How much would that discovery be worth if we could prove non-natural origins? Diana, that would be, there's no precedent. First contact, evidence of intelligence beyond Earth? You couldn't put a number on it. It would be the most significant discovery in human history. They didn't go public with that theory. Not yet. Dr. Kim wanted more evidence, more peer review, more certainty before making claims that would invite both scientific skepticism and government attention of the kind that bury discoveries for national security reasons. But knowing the possibility was there changed how Diana thought about Marcus's 15 years in the desert. Maybe he hadn't just been protecting unusual crystals. Maybe he'd been protecting something far more profound and had lacked the language or evidence to make anyone believe him. So he'd stayed quiet, documented everything, and waited for someone who'd take it seriously. That someone turned out to be the niece he barely knew, who'd inherited his burden and his discovery and had somehow managed not to screw it up completely. 5 years after Diana had counted $87 in a laundromat, she stood in her home office reviewing financial statements that showed her net worth had reached $412 million. The Crystal Cave licensing agreements had exceeded initial projections. The Marcus Chen Research Foundation had funded 37 independent researchers and published findings that challenged mainstream physics in ways that were now being taken seriously by institutions that had initially dismissed them. Lily was 10, thriving in school, talking about becoming a geologist like her great-uncle Marcus and her mom. Diana had remarried a kind man named David who worked in nonprofit management and had never once asked how much money she actually had. They'd met at a foundation fundraiser, bonded over discussions about ethical wealth distribution, and built something that felt genuine rather than transactional. Life was good, better than Diana had ever imagined possible during those dark months after the divorce, when every day had been a calculation of whether they'd survive another week. But she still went to the cave once a month, alone, sitting in the main chamber listening to crystals sing into darkness. Remembering Marcus, who'd had nothing and protected everything. Remembering Victor, who'd wanted everything and ended with nothing. Remembering the person she'd been when she arrived here, desperate, exhausted, counting dollars because hope was too expensive to afford. The crystals didn't care about any of it. They just hummed their eternal harmonics, doing what they'd done for millions of years before humans arrived and would do for millions of years after humans were gone. There was something comforting in that, the idea that some things existed beyond human need or desire, just being true independent of whether anyone was there to witness them. Diana pulled out her phone and recorded a video message she'd been meaning to make for years, but never quite found the courage to create. Speaking to the camera, speaking to her past self, speaking to anyone who might need to hear it. My name is Diana Chen. 5 years ago, I was homeless, divorced, living on $87 with a 6-year-old daughter who deserved better than I could give her. Then my uncle Marcus died and left me property worth $850, a trailer in the New Mexico desert and a cave nobody knew existed. She paused, gathering words that felt inadequate to the story. Victor Castellanos offered me $5,000 for it, then $30,000, then $50,000, then $500,000. Each time I said no, he escalated threats, legal harassment, attempts to take my daughter away. And each time, I was terrified I was making the wrong choice. That I should just take the money and walk away before everything collapsed. Diana looked around the cave, at crystals that caught her phone's light and fractured it into colors that seemed to come from somewhere beyond the visible spectrum. But I learned something Marcus spent 15 years learning. Some things are worth protecting even when protection costs everything. Even when you're scared and alone, and everyone says you're crazy for refusing the easy path. Because those things, the discoveries that challenge what we think we know, the truths that don't fit comfortable explanations, those are what move humanity forward. She turned the camera toward the crystals, capturing their faint bioluminescence and the subtle ways they seemed to pulse in rhythm with harmonics too low to hear consciously. The cave Marcus protected is now estimated to be worth over $600 million in licensing agreements and patent applications. But that's not why it mattered. It mattered because it was true. Because crystals shouldn't be able to convert sound into electricity at these efficiencies, and formations shouldn't organize themselves into perfect resonance chambers, and my uncle documented all of it while people called him crazy. Diana turned the camera back to herself. If you're watching this because you inherited something unusual, or discovered something that doesn't make sense, or have to choose between safety and truth, listen to me. Document everything. Find people who will take you seriously. Protect what matters, even when it's hard. Because the world needs uncomfortable truths more than comfortable lies. She ended the recording, uploaded it to the Foundation's website, and watched it go quietly viral over the next weeks. Not millions of views. This wasn't that kind of content, but thousands of scientists, independent researchers, and people struggling with their own discoveries found it and shared it. Messages arrived daily from people thanking her, arguing with her, asking for advice about their own situations. Diana answered what she could, realizing that part of honoring Marcus's legacy was helping others who were trying to protect difficult truths. The Foundation expanded its mission to include supporting independent researchers facing institutional resistance or corporate pressure, making sure the next Marcus Chen didn't spend 15 years alone in a desert because nobody would listen. Lily's 10th birthday party was the first time Diana invited everyone who mattered. Dr. Kim and her research team, Robert Chen and his colleagues from Los Alamos, Rita from a diner in Hollow Creek, Patricia and the other cousins who'd reconnected after learning about Marcus, even Rachel Morrison who'd handled the legal battles that had made all of this possible. They gathered in Diana's backyard, eating cake and watching Lily open presents, and Diana felt the weight of the past 5 years settling into something like peace. She'd started with nothing, inherited almost nothing, and turned it into more than she could spend in 3 lifetimes. But more important, she'd finished what Marcus started, made sure his work mattered, given Lily the childhood Diana had almost lost. Dr. Kim pulled her aside as the party was winding down. Diana, I want to tell you before we publish. We have enough evidence now to prove the black crystals weren't formed through standard geological processes. The atomic arrangements are too precise, the acoustic optimization too perfect. We're going public next month with findings that strongly suggest artificial or directed formation. Artificial meaning intelligence created these formations, possibly millions of years ago, possibly for purposes we can't yet determine. Diana, Marcus didn't just discover unusual minerals. He found evidence of something that challenges our understanding of who's been on Earth and what they left behind. Diana looked across the yard at Lily, at her daughter laughing with friends, and being exactly the kind of normal kid Diana had fought to give her the chance to become. Will going public with that put us in danger? Will the government try to classify it? Probably. But we're making sure the evidence is distributed internationally before announcement. Dozens of institutions have the data. They can't bury what they can't contain. Dr. Kim smiled. Your uncle taught us that protect truth through distribution. Make it impossible to hide. 6 months later, the announcement made global headlines. Scientists confirm crystal formations show evidence of non-natural origins. The academic papers were dense and careful, but the implications were clear. Something intelligent had influenced these formations' development, and humanity's timeline of civilization needed reconsideration. Diana watched the news coverage with Lily curled against her on the couch, both of them processing what this meant. Lily asked the question first. So Uncle Marcus found proof of aliens? Not aliens exactly, just proof that something more advanced than us has been here before. We don't know what, or when, or why they create crystals that convert sound to electricity. But yes, basically, that's so cool. Lily's enthusiasm was uncomplicated by the implications. Can I tell my class? Diana laughed. Baby, you can tell anyone you want. This is going to be in textbooks. And it was. Within a year, the Marcus Chen Cave, officially designated as such by the New Mexico Historical Society, appeared in geology textbooks, physics curricula, and even philosophy courses discussing the implications of non-human intelligence. Marcus's photograph appeared alongside his journals, and the memorial wall near the cave entrance became a pilgrimage site for scientists and researchers who wanted to honor the man who'd protected impossible truths for 15 years. 7 years after inheriting an $850 property, Diana's net worth stabilized at $593 million, the result of licensing agreements that had exceeded even the most optimistic projections. She established scholarships in Marcus's name at 5 universities, funded research stations in 3 countries, and endowed chairs at MIT and Cal State specifically for studying phenomena that challenged mainstream scientific models. The money kept arriving, and Diana kept finding ways to channel it toward purposes that honored what Marcus had died protecting. She spoke at conferences about independent research and the importance of protecting uncomfortable discoveries. She testified before congressional committees about the need for better support of civilian scientists. She became, somewhat unwillingly, the public face of a movement that valued truth over convenience. But her favorite moments were still the quiet ones. Once a month, she'd drive out to the cave with Lily, and they'd sit in the main chamber listening to crystals sing their eternal harmonics. Diana would tell stories about Marcus, some from his journals, some from her imagination, and Lily would ask questions about what it meant to protect something valuable, even when everyone said you were crazy. Did Uncle Marcus know it would turn out like this? That we'd be rich and famous because of him? Diana considered carefully. I don't think he cared about that. I think he just wanted someone to take it seriously, to understand that what he'd found mattered not because it was worth money, but because it was true. Do you think he'd be happy with what we did? Yeah, baby. I think he'd be proud. They sat in comfortable silence, mother and daughter, surrounded by evidence of intelligence beyond human understanding, listening to frequencies that had sung through millions of years and would sing through millions more. And Diana thought about the path that had brought them here, from $87 and sleeping in laundromats to more wealth than she could spend, from being threatened and intimidated to testifying before Congress about the importance of protecting difficult truths. All because Marcus Chen had refused to sell a cave to Victor Castellanos. All because he'd documented everything, protected it obsessively, and trusted that eventually someone would understand. Diana had been that someone, and she made sure Marcus's 15 years of lonely vigil weren't wasted. That his sacrifice meant something. That the crystals he'd protected kept singing long after he'd gone silent. 10 years after Diana had stood in a laundromat counting bills and calculating homelessness, she stood at a podium in Stockholm accepting the Nobel Prize in Physics on behalf of Dr. Kim's research team. The prize recognized their work on acoustic to electrical conversion and the implications for renewable energy, but Diana knew it was really honoring Marcus, the man who'd seen impossible truths and protected them when protection cost everything. She wore a simple dress, nothing extravagant, because Marcus would have hated extravagance, and held the medal thinking about how none of this should have happened. How a broke single mother with $87 should have sold to Victor for $5,000 and walked away. How statistical probability said she'd fail, lose everything, end up worse than she started. But she'd refused the easy path. Chosen principle over pragmatism. Protected what Marcus had died guarding. And somehow impossibly it had worked. During her acceptance speech, Diana pulled out the photograph she always carried. Marcus in his trailer, holding one of his journals, looking at the camera with eyes that understood he'd never be recognized in his lifetime, but didn't need recognition to know his work mattered. This is Marcus Chen. He discovered the acoustic crystal formations that made this prize possible. He spent 15 years documenting properties that challenged known physics, refusing offers from developers who would have destroyed what he protected. He died in poverty, alone, because he valued truth more than comfort. Diana's voice cracked slightly. He never asked for recognition. He just asked that someone continue his work when he was gone. I'm standing here because I was given that chance, and because Dr. Kim and her team had the courage to take uncomfortable discoveries seriously. But this prize belongs to Marcus. Everything we've accomplished is built on the foundation he laid alone. The audience, scientists and dignitaries, and people whose names Diana only recognized from textbooks, rose in standing ovation. For Marcus, for the lonely researcher who died protecting crystals that sang truths nobody wanted to hear. For everyone who'd ever chosen principle over convenience and paid the cost willingly. Lily, watching from the front row, was crying. Diana knew those were proud tears, happy tears, the tears that came when you understood someone you'd never met had given you everything and asked nothing in return. That night, after the ceremony and the reception and the congratulations from people whose work Diana had admired for years, she called Dr. Kim from her hotel room. "We did it. Marcus got recognized. You did it, Diana. You turned $850 into $608 million and made sure Marcus's name became synonymous with protecting difficult truths. That's extraordinary. I just didn't quit when quitting would have been easier. That's literally the definition of extraordinary. Most people take the $5,000 offer and walk away. You fought Victor Castellanos, the federal government, and your own exhaustion. You won because you refused to lose." Diana thought about that after hanging up. Refusing to lose. Maybe that was her real inheritance from Marcus. Not the cave or the crystals, but the stubborn conviction that some things were worth protecting regardless of cost. That truth mattered more than comfort. That the world needed people willing to stand alone when standing alone was required. She'd inherited that, and she'd passed it to Lily, and hopefully Lily would pass it to her own children someday. The Chen family legacy wasn't wealth, though they had that now in abundance. It was the willingness to protect uncomfortable truths, even when protection demanded everything. 15 years after Marcus died, 25 years after he'd first descended into the cave and heard crystals singing, the Marcus Chen Memorial Observatory opened adjacent to the cave site. It was a proper research facility with dormitories for visiting scientists, laboratories equipped with the latest acoustic analysis equipment, and lecture halls where graduate students learned about the formations that had changed physics. But at the center of everything, preserved exactly as Marcus had left it, was his trailer. The camp stove where he'd cooked meals. The notebooks where he'd documented 15 years of observations. The narrow bed where he'd slept between descents into darkness. Visitors walked through it with the reverence usually reserved for historical figures, understanding they were seeing where someone had lived while protecting something irreplaceable. Diana led the dedication ceremony with Lily beside her, now 17 and planning to study geological engineering at MIT. Patricia was there, elderly but still sharp, representing the family that had dismissed Marcus and now understood what they'd missed. Dr. Kim spoke about the scientific importance of the cave. Robert Chen discussed the defense applications that had been developed, ethically under strict oversight. Rachel Morrison, Diana's lawyer who'd become a close friend, talked about the legal precedents their case had established for protecting independent research. And Victor Castellanos was mentioned exactly once, in a plaque describing the history of attempted acquisitions. Despite repeated offers from private developers, Marcus Chen maintained exclusive control of the property until his death, ensuring scientific study would proceed without commercial compromise. No name, just private developers. Victor had become a footnote, forgotten except as an obstacle that had been overcome. Diana didn't feel triumphant about that anymore, just grateful it was over. The ceremony concluded with a moment of silence, and Diana used it to send a mental message to the uncle she'd barely known. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for refusing to sell. Thank you for showing me that some things are worth protecting even when protection costs everything. You died alone, but your work lives on. That has to count for something. The crowd dispersed, but Diana lingered near the memorial wall where Marcus's name was carved alongside his quote about crystals singing truths that money couldn't measure. Lily appeared beside her, slipping a hand into Diana's. "Do you think Uncle Marcus knows that we finished his work?" Diana squeezed her daughter's hand. "I think he knew before he died that someone would. That's why he left me the property instead of letting it go to the state or be sold for taxes. He had faith that whoever inherited it would understand what mattered. I'm glad it was us." "Yeah, baby. Me too." They walked back to the car as sunset painted the desert in colors that seemed impossible but were just physics playing tricks with light. The cave entrance was visible in the distance, steel door glinting, and Diana could almost feel the crystals humming beneath the ground. Still singing, still producing harmonics that challenged known physics and suggested intelligence beyond human understanding. Marcus had protected them for 15 years. Diana had protected them for 17. And now they were protected permanently, secured under federal preservation status, studied by institutions that had the resources and expertise to understand them properly. The inheritance had been $850 of desert property and a cave full of singing crystals. The outcome had been $608 million, a Nobel Prize, and the knowledge that uncomfortable truths could be protected if someone was willing to stand alone long enough for help to arrive. Diana drove home with Lily beside her, both of them tired but content, and thought about the laundromat where this had all started. The moment she'd counted $87 and contemplated homelessness. The phone call about an inheritance from an uncle she didn't remember. The choice to see the property instead of selling sight unseen. Every decision after that had felt impossible at the time. Refusing Victor's escalating offers. Standing up to threats about losing Lily. Going public with discoveries that invited government scrutiny and corporate pressure. Fighting when fighting seemed futile and surrender seemed sensible. But she'd learned something Marcus had known for 15 years. Impossible just meant nobody had succeeded yet. It didn't mean success was actually impossible, just that it required more courage, more persistence, more willingness to stand alone than most people possessed. Diana had possessed just enough to make it through. And now Lily was growing up understanding that principle mattered more than convenience, that truth was worth protecting, and that family legacy wasn't measured in dollars, but in values passed down through generations. The crystals would keep singing long after Diana was gone, long after Lily was gone, long after humans had forgotten the Chen family entirely. But for now, in this moment, they sang for Marcus who'd protected them, for Diana who'd honored his protection, and for Lily who would carry forward the understanding that some things were worth standing alone to defend. That was worth more than $608 million. That was worth everything. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.